Hello and welcome to this online module. This week we are going to be discussing how to support neurodiverse students, what we started on last week. And specifically, we're going to be looking at some of the disorders that cause behavioral challenges. We're going to be talking about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We're going to be talking about autism, which we started talking about last semester, so we're going to continue on with that. And we're also going to be looking at emotional behavioral disorders. We abbreviate that as EBD. These are three disorders that are on a significant rise in our K-12 students, and they're disorders that really challenge us as educators. So let's go ahead and start off with ADHD. And ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. That's a mouthful, so you can see why we abbreviate it as ADHD. And it's important for us to really delve into the definition because ADHD is a chronic condition, which means it's not something that a child displays one day and then the rest of the week they're fine. We all, I think, have had experiences where we felt like we had ADHD, but it's not a lasting type of thing. It might be due to lack of sleep. It might be due to stress. This is a condition that shows up in childhood. A lot of students are diagnosed really starting at age 4 on up. Sometimes they don't get diagnosed till they're in school. And it is a condition that often lasts through adulthood. So there are a lot of adults who still have ADHD. The key things, the key symptoms or what shows up with somebody with ADHD is their ability to not be able to focus, hyperactive. They are constantly moving. Their pencil is tapping on the table, they're bouncing their knee up against the desk. Their hands are moving, their head is constantly moving, but they're just in constant movement. And impulsivity, where they'll just jump on something. The first thing that comes to their mind, they'll do it without thinking through or without thinking through the ramifications. Here's the thing. We're not exactly sure what causes ADHD. There are a lot of hypotheses out there. There have been quite a few studies done. And so we're starting to see some connections, but there hasn't been anything definitive as this is the main cause. And in fact, a lot of researchers are saying there are multiple potential causes. And there seems to be a genetic link in terms of people who have ADHD often tend to have children who have ADHD. They also are looking at chromosomal types of things, low birth weight. So students who are born or children who are born with a low birth rate have a higher propensity towards ADHD. Moms who smoke or drank alcohol during pregnancy tend to have a higher rate of having children with ADHD. But there are also environmental factors that are starting to be linked. Exposure to lead, pesticides, other toxins in our environment. One of the interesting things that recent research has shown is that people who have ADHD, their brains work differently. The neurotransmitters that send messages from one neuron in the brain to the other have been found to work differently. And you're going to be seeing a video that will go into that more in depth. But what it's showing is that when they do the brain scans of people with ADHD, they've found that certain parts of their brains are less active, which is a fascinating thing because you think if they're hyperactive and they're impulsive, doesn't that seem like the brains would be working overtime? Well, in certain areas, yes, and in other areas, no. which is fascinating. And the United States Center for Disease Control is reporting currently that approximately 11% of school-age children, so from kinder on up through high school, are diagnosed with ADHD. Now remember, that's diagnosed. So you will probably have many more students who show signs of ADHD, but who haven't been formally diagnosed. So how do these students get diagnosed? It happens through a medical doctor. So we as educators, even though we might know it in our gut, we cannot diagnose. And I want to actually give you a warning here. You as an educator, if you go and say to a parent, I think your child has ADHD, you are personally liable to pay for the medical diagnosis, because we as educators cannot diagnose any of these disorders. So you have to be super, super careful. We can recommend to a parent, here are the things that I'm seeing, right? When I have Johnny in second period algebra, here's what I'm noticing. Have you thought about consulting, your family doctor or whomever, right, to do an evaluation on Johnny? We can say things like that, but we cannot diagnose because we are not medical doctors. So how does that diagnosis happen? Well, more and more doctors are getting knowledgeable about ADHD. So hopefully the student is going to a doctor who's knowledgeable. But they often will gather information from a variety of sources. And especially if they're getting diagnosed at an older age, the doctor will usually do a checklist. That there's a version for teachers to sign or fill out. There's a version for parents, and there's even a version for older children. And they're looking for these types of characteristics. Is the child easily distracted? Do they not seem to be listening even when you're looking right at them? Do they often lose things? So messiness and not being able to find where they've put things is also a potential clue. They're in constant motion. They don't finish tasks. Like they'll start, but they get distracted and they don't finish. Also making careless mistakes. So they know how to spell the word receive, but when they write, they hurry through it and they misspell it. The doctor will also do a full physical exam usually. There's a relatively new tool being used, and it's an EEG-based assessment that measures the theta and beta brain waves. And remember how I said in the previous slide that we're seeing that the brain is working at different speeds with students with ADHD. And so it's really measuring these types of waves. And what they're finding is that these two types of brain waves, there are significant differences with children or people who have ADHD versus those who do not. So I want you to hear from an expert who has treated a wide variety of people with ADHD. And the video is rather long, but has so much good information. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to do a Padlet activity, which I'll put the link in there. And really what it is, it's our thought or our processing wall. So I would like you every 10 minutes or so to put the video on pause and go back and add a thought to our wall, thinking about what are your key learnings on ADHD up until that point. So basically 3 different times I'm asking you to stop the video, obviously wherever it makes sense to you, or when you have an aha moment like, wow, I didn't know that about ADHD, or that's a great strategy for me to use in the classroom, or wow, this is making me think about students for my fieldwork class last year and what I saw, and just add to the wall and be reading each other's thoughts and reflecting on what you're learning so far.